Hey, it's Meg. Welcome back to my channel. So I think jelly printing must be probably one of the most popular techniques to use when you're art journaling. I see it absolutely everywhere. It always looks really fun and you get so many different ways to do mark making and creating like fodder for your journals. And it's just something that I've never tried. I've never got round to it. So when I saw that there was a jelly printing workshop near me recently, I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to try it out, see what it's like, and I had so much fun creating all these prints. Now they're obviously not all amazing. I was trying different techniques and trying to get the hang of like adding the paint. I was adding too much paint, not enough paint. So if you have a jelly plate and you do a lot of printing and you have any tips for me as a beginner, I'd love to know, because we actually got to take away the jelly plate from the session, so I'll definitely be doing some experimenting and playing with that more for creating some collage fodder and things like that in my journals. So if you have any tips or techniques that you like to try, things that you enjoy doing with your jelly plate, then I'd love to hear them, and ideas that I can sort of trial out on the printing techniques. So these are all of the different test prints that I was doing. We did some on just like regular like printer paper, copy paper, and there was also a few different papers to try out, see how prints would work on different materials. So there was this sewing pattern paper, which as soon as I saw that I was like, I have to try doing some printing on that, because I thought that would look really cool with the kind of transparencies, and just, you know, it's my sort of colorway anyway, with some more muted tones, because I think that's where jelly printing is really fun. And I know I sort of picked some really wild colors. I was just really drawn to the bright pink and the sort of tealy colors that day. I don't know why, but I get the impression that to get like a really good contrast, you've obviously got to have colors that pop. And I don't tend to use a lot of like bright colors, so it was kind of interesting to figure out how that might work within sort of my own art style. So you'll see when I'm turning these prints into some journaling cards, because I thought that might be a cool way to use them within my junk journals. I'm kind of trying to tread the line between including those pops of colour, but then also muting it down a bit with some of my collage papers, and just having that bit of balance. And I think that it worked quite well actually, in terms of still staying true to the patterns and things that were in the samples, but kind of translating them into something that I think would work quite well within the sort of style and colours that I normally work in. So I just had these little square sheets of paper that had some patterns on the reverse, so I thought that would be good for doing journaling on the reverse, and then having this pattern or sort of collage that I'm working with on the top. So the first print that I was really excited to use actually was this one on the sewing paper. So you can see there's with black ink, it's pressed leaves, and I thought that this just would work really nicely as more of a translucent element, and I just decided to glue it straight over the top of my collage base. So you can obviously still see through all of the text and the details, and because of the colours kind of matching with the sewing paper, it almost melts into the page a little bit, and then you can just see the details of the leaves in the black, which I think works really nicely, keeps it nice and neutral, but you still get that print effect. And I think the paper as well adds a nice texture to the card overall. So it was really nice to use this as kind of an overall design on this card. And then what I decided to do once I had trimmed off all the edges was to come in with my corner rounder and just take away those harsh corners. I ended up doing this on all three of the cards that I created. I think it just kind of helps to soften it a bit. After that, I decided to come in over the top with a stencil. So the card was feeling a little bit dark, like there was enough contrast, but I just felt like something needed to brighten it up a little bit, and whenever I need to do that on a journal page or anything else that I'm working on, I always go straight to my white Uniball Signo gel pen because I really love the way that it looks on my pages. And I decided to use this stencil, and I thought maybe I could use paint and obviously just, you know, do it as a traditional stencil. But actually using it with this pen and using the more of an outline helped to kind of add the pop of contrast and of white highlights that I wanted, but without sort of taking over the entire card. So you'll see once I've kind of gone over it a few times on, I ended up doing it in one corner and then turning the card around and then doing it again in the top corner, so there was kind of that matching between the two. It helps to kind of, you can still see through, so it doesn't feel like it obstructs what's already on the card itself. Like, I didn't want to cover up too much more of the collage, nor did I obviously want to detract from the beautiful pattern that I've got there from the jelly printing. So I just wanted to add something that would be nice and subtle. It feels quite elegant in a way, and it's always really fun just to do some tracing or some like outlining of things in my stencils, and it's just a different way to use them because the effect looks completely different to when you just use it normally and you fill in the whole thing with paint. So if you haven't tried something like this, I definitely recommend doing this because it's kind of a way to get more out of your art supplies and your stencils, and it's just a different way of thinking about how you can add different design elements to your journal pages. So my initial idea was actually to use some of the jelly printing, particularly these really bold, bright patterns, was to use them as like tabs and cut out small elements to then add onto the side of the page. So you'll just see here I'm working on folding out a portion of one of these prints. You get a really kind of abstract cut of some of the print, and I thought it might look nice as a bit of a contrast against all of the neutrals that I have, but I think it ended up being like too much of a contrast. It just felt really odd and I couldn't bring myself to use it on this card. You can see here I'm trying to see how it might look, so you can see there, you know, I could like staple it or glue it on, but it just felt like too much. And once I'd cut this section off, I decided, well, I might as well use this part now for creating the next card. So I decided let's go all in and start with one of the coloured patterns. So I'm just adding it in a kind of strip here, and then cutting off the excess, and then rather than getting another piece, I just decided to use that offcut and sort of overlay it and add it again to the card. So I didn't cover the entirety of the card, I just sort of used it as a way of adding a bit of colour and then left that blank white space there. And I decided to use some of the offcuts of this sewing paper. You can tell I'm really loving this paper, but I thought it would be nice to kind of keep the colour story between the cards that I'm making, so it's kind of a nod to the other one, and it's also a way to push some of those bright colours back, and I really actually like the way that it kind of fades over the top of it all, and is just an element that helps kind of bring it together a little bit more, and it adds some interest and some dimension to the card without completely covering anything, so you can still see through it, but it just helps to soften the edges a bit, especially because I had kind of two just rectangles stuck together, and having that torn edge piece going across them helps to soften that. And again, I'm just rounding off these corners here again just to match the other card, so you can see there how the colour story kind of flows through the cards, but it's not like identical. And then I decided, seeing as I was using a lot of colour anyway, let's go in with this bright pink scrap piece of paper that I had, and I wanted to make a little bit of a focal point on the left hand side of this card. So my process for this was to just pick some collage elements that went with the colour scheme that I already had and complemented that. So the pink, and then I also decided to add an old stamp. So I had this blue one here, which I thought was the perfect match for the colour already on this card. And it was just enough to add some little details, some washi tape here as well in a more neutral tone, just a little grid there to add some extra details. So not like a huge amount, but just some little bits that I added onto the cards. And then I decided to do a third one. So for this one, I was again using just my own collage materials as a bit of a base. So this also helped to strengthen the card as well, because I was just using obviously some scrap paper. So this collage element sort of also added some thickness to help make them a little bit more sturdy. And then I was just choosing which pattern to use, and I decided this pink one that I did as a bit of a mask would work really well. So I actually just tore off one of the corners and decided to turn it around and use it as more of a design element. And I really love how this pops on this card. It's not something that I would expect to normally enjoy using in my art, but I think it was a pleasant surprise to see how I could still keep the bits that I like about when I create, but then also add in these new elements here as well. And I decided to also add some of the blue and black print that I have here to again keep that kind of theme within these cards, which I tend to do if I'm making a few different things at once. I will try and keep like a similar theme or colour story to help them all tie in together. And so I'm using some of the leftovers of the first print that I was using to add some neutral tones to this card and finish off the background element, because even though I'd added that collage piece originally, it felt a little bit too plain for this piece. So I just decided to add this on, and I didn't add it like completely straight, I just added it at an angle, which adds some interest to the card and the overall design of these. I really enjoyed adding this pink colouring pencil in between the gaps of the stencil. I think that it added such a nice pop and really brought everything together, especially with the pinks. So those are the 3 journal cards that I made using my jelly printing from my workshop. I'll definitely be doing more jelly printing in the future. Like I said, if you have any tips, let me know down below. But as always, thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys!